Jessy Morgan never imagined that a simple accident in her own kitchen would turn into a 5-year battle that would expose negligence, gaslighting, and a healthcare system more interested in protecting itself than protecting patients. What started as second-degree burns on her forearm became a nightmare of dismissed concerns, botched treatments, and a young woman being told over and over that she was overreacting to her own pain. But when a renowned plastic surgeon finally saw what had been done to her and what had been hidden, everything changed. This is the story of how Jessy refused to be silenced and how the truth finally came to light in a courtroom where medical professionals were forced to answer for their failures. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jessy Morgan was 28 years old and living exactly the kind of life she'd worked hard to build. She had a small apartment in Austin, Texas, with large windows that let in the morning sun, a collection of houseplants she actually managed to keep alive, and a job she genuinely liked as a project coordinator for a sustainable architecture firm. Her days were busy but fulfilling, reviewing blueprints, coordinating with contractors, making sure eco-friendly building projects stayed on schedule and within budget. She wasn't rich, but she was comfortable. She had a tight circle of friends, a weekly yoga class she rarely missed, and Sunday brunches with her younger brother, Tyler, who was finishing his degree at the University of Texas. Her parents, Linda and Robert Morgan, had retired to a small town outside San Antonio, and Jessy visited them once a month, always bringing her mom's favorite sourdough bread from a local bakery. Jessy prided herself on being independent and capable. She'd moved to Austin right after college, determined to make it on her own without relying on her parents' help. She'd learned to change her own oil, fix a leaky faucet, and cook elaborate meals from scratch. Her friends joked that she was the most competent person they knew, the one who always had a first aid kit in her car, who remembered everyone's birthdays, who could troubleshoot anything from a broken Wi-Fi router to a difficult client. But beneath that competent exterior, Jessy carried something she rarely talked about, a deep-seated need to prove she wasn't a burden. Growing up, she'd watched her mother struggle with chronic migraines that doctors dismissed for years as just stress or probably hormonal. She'd seen her father work extra shifts to pay for medical bills that insurance wouldn't cover. She'd learned early that complaining about pain or discomfort was often met with skepticism, especially for women. So Jessy became someone who powered through, who didn't make a fuss, who handled things herself. Her apartment was her sanctuary. She decorated it carefully over the years. Vintage posters from Texas music festivals, a bookshelf crammed with novels and design magazines, a small kitchen where she loved to experiment with new recipes. The kitchen was narrow but efficient, with white subway tiles she'd installed herself and open shelving displaying her collection of mismatched ceramic mugs. It was a Tuesday evening in March when everything changed. Jessy had gotten home late from work after a particularly long meeting about a stalled project in Round Rock. She was tired and hungry, and she decided to make her comfort meal, homemade tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches. She put a pot of tomato sauce on the stove to simmer and started slicing sourdough bread. The kitchen was small, and Jessy had developed efficient movements from years of cooking in tight spaces. She reached across the stove to grab the olive oil from the back of the counter, not realizing that the pot handle was sticking out farther than usual. Her forearm brushed against the metal handle, not even a full-on grab, just contact, but the pot had been on high heat for 15 minutes. The pain was instant and shocking. Jessy jerked back, but the damage was done. A stripe of angry red skin ran along her left forearm, about 4 inches long and 2 inches wide. Within seconds, the skin began to blister. She ran cold water over it immediately, her hands shaking, her heart pounding. The pain was unlike anything she'd experienced, a searing, throbbing agony that made her feel nauseous. After 20 minutes under cold water, she carefully dried the area and examined it. The skin was bright red with several large blisters already forming. She knew enough about burns to recognize this was serious, definitely second degree, possibly worse in some spots. She applied antibiotic ointment from her first aid kit and covered it with sterile gauze, but the pain was so intense she could barely think straight. She called her friend Maya Patel, a nurse at Del Seaton Medical Center, who immediately told her to go to an urgent care clinic. Burns can get infected really quickly, Jess. You need to have someone look at it tonight, not tomorrow. Jessy hated the idea of spending hours in an urgent care waiting room, but the pain was unbearable. She drove herself to Austin Immediate Care on West 6th Street, gripping the steering wheel with her right hand while trying to keep her left arm still. Every small movement sent fresh waves of pain through her arm. The urgent care center was busy, but not packed. After a 30-minute wait, a physician's assistant named Derek Chen called her back. He was young, probably only a few years out of school, and he seemed rushed. Jessy unwrapped the gauze and showed him the burn. Okay, yeah, that's a pretty good burn. Second degree for sure. Have you been keeping it clean? I just did it about an hour ago. I ran it under cold water right away and put antibiotic ointment on it. Good, that's good. He pulled on gloves and barely touched the edges of the burn, making Jessy wince. He'll clean it up, put some burn cream on it, and wrap it. You'll need to change the dressing daily and keep it covered for about a week. Should heal up fine. It hurts a lot, Jessy said, feeling almost embarrassed to admit it. Is that normal? Burns hurt, yeah. I'll give you a prescription for some pain medication. Take it as directed, keep it clean, and follow up with your primary care doctor if it's not looking better in a week. The whole examination took less than 5 minutes. Derek cleaned the area with a solution that stung so badly, Jessy had to bite her lip to keep from crying out. He applied a thick layer of Silvadine cream and wrapped her arm in clean gauze and a stretchy bandage. He handed her prescriptions for pain medication and antibiotic ointment, gave her a photocopied sheet about burn care, and sent her on her way. You're going to be fine, he said with a quick smile as he walked her to the door. Just keep it clean and covered. Jessy filled her prescriptions at a 24-hour pharmacy and went home. The pain medication helped take the edge off, but she barely slept that night. Every time she moved her arm or accidentally bumped it against something, the pain flared up so intensely it made her gasp. She propped her arm on a pillow and tried to find a comfortable position, but comfort seemed impossible. Her Tyler texted her around noon. Hey sis, still on for lunch Sunday?
Jessy responded, had a kitchen accident, burned my arm pretty bad. Might need a rain check. He called immediately. Are you okay? Do you need anything? I'm fine, Jessy assured him, even though she didn't feel fine at all. Just clumsy, touched a hot pot handle. It hurts like hell, but I went to urgent care. They said it'll heal. Do you need me to come over? I can bring food or help out. No, seriously, I'm okay. I'm just going to rest today. Let's do lunch next weekend instead. That was Jessy, always assuring everyone she was fine, always minimizing her own needs. She'd learned that lesson well over the years. Don't be dramatic, don't overreact, handle it yourself. The following days became a blur of pain management and dressing changes. Following the urgent care instructions, Jessy unwrapped the bandage each morning, cleaned the burn, applied fresh cream, and rewrapped it. But instead of getting better, the burn seemed to be getting worse. The blisters had burst, and the exposed skin beneath looked raw and angry. The redness was spreading beyond the original burn area, and the pain wasn't decreasing. If anything, it was getting more intense. A week after the accident, Jessy sat in her bathroom changing the dressing and noticed something that made her stomach drop. The edges of the burn were starting to look dark, almost grayish. And there was a smell, faint but unmistakable, that she knew wasn't right. She took a photo of the burn with her phone and texted it to Maya. The response came within minutes. Jess, that doesn't look good. You need to see a doctor today. That could be infected. She stared at the image on her phone, then at her arm. Deep down, she'd known something was wrong, but she'd been telling herself she was overreacting, that burns just took time to heal, that she needed to be patient. But looking at her arm now, At the darkening tissue and the spreading redness, she couldn't deny it anymore. Something was very wrong.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Jessy called her primary care physician's office the moment they opened Thursday morning. The receptionist, speaking in that practiced, cheerful tone that medical offices seem to require, informed her that Dr. Patricia Hendricks was fully booked for the next 2 weeks. "I have a burn that I think might be infected," Jessy said, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. "I went to urgent care last week, but it's getting worse instead of better." "Hold, please." The line went silent except for tinny hold music. 3 minutes passed. 4. Jessy paced her apartment, cradling her phone against her ear with her right hand while her left arm throbbed in its bandages. "Ms. Morgan?" The receptionist was back. "Dr. Hendricks can see you at 4:15 today. We had a cancellation." Jessy exhaled in relief. "Thank you. I'll be there." She tried to work from home that morning, reviewing contractor bids for the Thornton project, but she couldn't concentrate. The pain had evolved into something constant and nauseating, a deep ache punctuated by sharp jolts whenever she moved. She'd been taking the pain medication exactly as prescribed, but it barely touched the discomfort anymore. At 3:30, she drove to the medical plaza on South Lamar Boulevard where Dr. Hendricks practiced. The waiting room was crowded with the usual mix of coughing children and elderly patients reading outdated magazines. Jessy checked in and sat in a corner chair, cradling her arm and watching the minutes tick by on the wall clock. 40 minutes later, a medical assistant called her name. Jessy followed her down the hallway, through the familiar routine of weight, blood pressure, temperature. The assistant noted everything in her tablet without really looking at Jessy. "What brings you in today?" she asked, fingers poised over the screen. "I have a burn on my arm that I think is infected." "How long have you had it?" 8 days. I went to urgent care the night it happened." The assistant typed, "Dr. Hendricks will be right in." Jessy sat on the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath her. She stared at the anatomy posters on the walls, the muscular system, the circulatory system, all those intricate diagrams of a body working properly. She unwrapped her bandage slowly, wincing as some of the gauze stuck to the wound. When Dr. Hendricks finally entered, she looked harried. She was a woman in her late 50s, with gray-streaked hair pulled into a practical bun, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She'd been seeing her for 3 years and generally liked her, though their appointments always felt rushed. "Jessy, let's see what we've got." Dr. Hendricks pulled on gloves and examined the burn, her expression neutral and clinical. She touched the edges, pressed gently around the perimeter. Jessy gritted her teeth against the pain. "This is from a cooking accident?" Dr. Hendricks asked, reading from the tablet the assistant had left. "Yes, a pot handle. The urgent care PA said it was 2nd degree." Dr. Hendricks peered closer. "There's definitely some infection here." "You've been changing the dressing daily?" "Every morning, exactly like they told me." "And you're using the Silvadane cream?" "Yes, twice a day." Dr. Hendricks straightened up and pulled off her gloves. "Okay, burns this size can be tricky. The infection isn't severe, but we need to get ahead of it. I'm going to prescribe you an oral antibiotic, cephalaxin, 500 milligrams, 4 times a day for 10 days. Continue with the Silvadane and the dressing changes. Keep it elevated as much as possible." Jessy hesitated. Something in Dr. Hendricks' tone felt dismissive, like this was a minor inconvenience, rather than something that was causing her significant pain and worry. "It's been getting darker around the edges, and it hurts worse than it did a week ago. Is that normal?" "Infections cause inflammation, which causes pain," Dr. Hendricks said, already typing the prescription into her computer. "The antibiotics will help. Give it a few days to start working." "What if it doesn't get better?" "Then call us and we'll have you come back in, but I expect you'll see improvement within 72 hours of starting the antibiotics." Dr. Hendricks gave her a professional smile. "Try not to worry. Burns heal slowly, and they're painful while they do it. You're doing everything right." Jessy wanted to push back, to say that this felt like more than normal burn pain, that something seemed fundamentally wrong, but Dr. Hendricks was already moving toward the door, and Jessy found herself nodding, accepting the prescription printout, being ushered back to the checkout desk. She filled the prescription at the same pharmacy as before. The pharmacist, an older man with kind eyes named Frank, actually looked at her when he handed over the bag. "This is for a burn infection?" "Yes. Make sure you take the full course even if you start feeling better. And if you develop a fever or if the redness spreads, you need to be seen again right away. Don't wait." "Okay, thank you." Jessy started the antibiotics that evening, taking the first dose with dinner, scrambled eggs that she could prepare one-handed. She elevated her arm on pillows while watching television, trying to distract herself from the constant throb. Tyler texted asking how she was doing, and she sent back a thumbs-up emoji and, "Doc gave me antibiotics, should be fine." But 72 hours later, Jessy was not fine. The antibiotics had done nothing. The burn looked worse. The grayish areas had expanded, and the redness now stretched from her wrist almost to her elbow. The smell was stronger too, a sickly sweet odor that made her gag when she changed the dressing.
She called Dr. Hendricks' office again Monday morning. This time, there were no cancellations. The earliest appointment was Thursday, 5 days away. "I really need to be seen sooner," Jessy said, her voice cracking. "It's not getting better. It's getting worse." The receptionist put her on hold again. When she came back, her tone had shifted from cheerful to slightly annoyed. "Dr. Hendricks reviewed your chart and she says to continue the antibiotics. Sometimes it takes longer than 72 hours to see improvement. If you develop a fever over 101, or if you notice red streaks running up your arm, go to the emergency room. Otherwise, keep your Thursday appointment." "But is there anything else I can help you with today, Miss Morgan?" Jessy hung up, feeling dismissed and confused. She looked down at her arm, at the obvious deterioration happening beneath the bandage. How was this not enough to warrant being seen? That afternoon at work, she'd dragged herself in because she'd already missed too many days. Her coworker Rachel Kim noticed her wincing as she typed one-handed. "Jessy, are you okay? You look terrible." "Just this burn. It's not healing right." "Can I see?" Jessy reluctantly unwrapped enough of the bandage to show the edges. Rachel's eyes widened. "Jesus, Jess, that looks really bad. Have you been to a doctor?" "Twice. They keep telling me it's fine, that I just need to be patient." Rachel frowned. "My cousin had a burn that got infected like that. She ended up needing wound care at a special clinic. You might want to get a second opinion." The words hung in the air. Second opinion. It felt almost rebellious to consider it, like she'd be admitting the doctors were wrong, like she'd be proving she was one of those difficult patients who didn't trust medical advice. But that night, unable to sleep because of the pain, Jessy found herself Googling infected burn treatment Austin and burn wound care specialists. Page after page of results confirmed what Rachel had said. Serious burn infections needed specialized treatment, sometimes surgical debridement, sometimes skin grafts. At 2 a.m, Jessy stood in her bathroom under the fluorescent lights and carefully unwrapped her bandage completely. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Large sections of the burn had turned black, not grayish anymore, actually black like charred meat. The surrounding skin was swollen and hot to the touch, radiating heat she could feel even before her fingers made contact. And the smell was undeniable now, putrid and wrong. This wasn't healing slowly. This was dying tissue. Jessy rewrapped her arm with shaking hands, her heart pounding. Every medical professional she had seen had told her to be patient, to stop worrying, that she was doing everything right. But her body was screaming that something was catastrophically wrong. She picked up her phone and texted Maya, "I need to go to the ER. Can you tell me which one you'd go to?" The response came immediately. "Del Satan, I'm working tomorrow night. Come in and ask for me. What's wrong?" "My burn. It's really bad." "How bad?" Jessy took a photo and sent it. Maya's response was instant. "Jessy, come now. Don't wait until tomorrow. That's necrotic tissue. You need IV antibiotics and surgical evaluation. I'm serious. Go now." Jessy stared at the word on her screen, necrotic. Dead tissue. The thing she had been afraid to admit. The thing the doctors had implicitly told her she was overreacting about by not seeing her urgently. She grabbed her keys, her insurance card, her phone charger.
At 2:30 a.m., she drove herself to Del Sutton Medical Center, her infected arm cradled against her chest, finally allowing herself to acknowledge what she'd known for days. This wasn't just a bad burn that needed time to heal. This was a medical emergency that had been ignored, dismissed, and minimized until it had become something far worse than it ever should have been.
The emergency room at Del Seton Medical Center was surprisingly quiet for a Tuesday night in the early hours. Jessy checked in at the triage desk, where a nurse with tired eyes took one look at her arm and immediately flagged her chart as urgent. "How long has it been like this?" the nurse asked, unwrapping the bandage with practiced efficiency. "The burn happened 12 days ago, but it's been getting worse for the past week." The nurse's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And you've been seen by doctors?" "Urgent care the night it happened, my primary care physician 5 days ago." "What did they tell you?" "That I needed to be patient, that burns heal slowly." The nurse, her badge read K. Martinez, RN, looked up and met Jessy's eyes directly. "This should have been treated aggressively days ago. You're going straight back. We need to get you on IV antibiotics immediately and page the surgical team." Hearing those words, surgical team, made everything suddenly real in a way it hadn't been before. Jessy felt her throat tighten. "Is it that serious?" Nurse Martinez didn't sugarcoat it. "You have what looks like third-degree necrosis with advancing cellulitis. Yes, it's serious, but you came to the right place, and we're going to take care of you." Within 10 minutes, Jessy was in a treatment bay with an IV in her right arm, pumping broad-spectrum antibiotics into her system. A resident named Dr. James Okonkwo came in to examine her, his face grave as he studied the wound under better lighting than Jessy had at home. "I'm going to be honest with you, Miss Morgan," he said, pulling up a rolling stool. "This is a third-degree burn in the center with significant tissue death. The infection has spread into the deeper tissue layers. We're going to need to do surgical debridement, that means removing all the dead tissue, and you'll probably need skin grafting after that." The words hit Jessy like physical blows. Surgery? Skin grafting? But the urgent care doctor said it was second degree. He said it would heal on its own. Dr. Okonkwo's expression darkened. "Either it progressed after you were seen, or it was misdiagnosed initially. Either way, what you have now requires surgical intervention. I'm calling in Dr. Angela Reeves. She's one of our burn specialists, and she's excellent." Maya appeared in the doorway, still in her scrubs from working the floor. "Jess, oh my God!" She came to the bedside and took Jessy's good hand. "Why didn't you come in sooner?" Jessy said, and then suddenly she was crying, big, gasping sobs that she'd been holding back for days. "They made me feel like I was being dramatic." "You weren't being dramatic," Maya said fiercely. "This should have been caught and treated properly from the beginning." Dr. Angela Reeves arrived an hour later. She was a Black woman in her 40s with confident movements and an air of someone who had seen everything and couldn't be rattled. She examined Jessy's arm with gentle but thorough precision, asking detailed questions about timelines, symptoms, and what treatments had been attempted. "Okay," Dr. Reeves said finally. "Here's where we are. You have full-thickness tissue death here, here, and here." She indicated the black areas. "The infection has created an abscess in this region, and there's cellulitis spreading up your arm. We're going to need to get you to the OR within the next few hours to debride all the necrotic tissue and drain the abscess. The sooner we do this, the better your outcome will be." "Will I?" She couldn't finish the question, but Dr. Reeves understood. "Will you lose your arm?" "No. Absolutely not. But you're going to have significant scarring and will need to do reconstructive work. This is going to be a process, Miss Morgan, not a single fix." "How long a process?" "Multiple surgeries over several months, skin grafting, possibly tissue expansion depending on how much healthy tissue we're left with, physical therapy, scar management. I won't lie to you, it's going to be difficult, but you'll have full function of your arm when we're done." Jessy nodded, wiping her eyes with her good hand. "Okay, what do I need to do?" "Right now, nothing. We're going to prep you for surgery. You'll be admitted for at least 3 days post-op so we can monitor the infection and make sure the IV antibiotics are working. Do you have someone you need to call?" Jessy thought of Tyler, of her parents. It was 3:30 in the morning.
My brother and my parents, but can I wait until after? I don't want them to panic. Dr. Reeves considered this. Call your brother now. You're going to need support when you're discharged, and he should know what's happening. Your parents can wait until morning if you prefer. Maya squeezed her hand. I'll stay with you until they take you back, and I'll call Tyler if you want. No, I should do it. Jessy picked up her phone with shaking hands and called her brother. Tyler answered on the fourth ring, his voice thick with sleep. Jess, what's wrong? I'm at Del Seaton. I'm okay, but I need surgery on my burn. It got infected badly. He heard rustling, then Tyler's voice much more alert. I'm coming right now. Don't do anything until I get there. Tyler, they need to take me soon. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I'm leaving now. He made it in 12. When he burst into the treatment bay, his hair sticking up and wearing sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, Jessy felt a fresh wave of tears. He looked at her arm, now unwrapped and exposed under the harsh lights, the full horror of it visible, and his face went pale.
Jesus Christ, Jess. How did it get this bad? They kept saying I was overreacting, she whispered. Tyler's expression shifted from shock to anger. Who? Who said that? Everyone. The urgent care, my doctor, they all acted like I was being dramatic. Maya spoke up from the corner. She has necrotic tissue and a systemic infection. This should have been treated as a serious burn injury from day one. Tyler turned to her. Are you saying they screwed up? I'm saying the care she received was inadequate, Maya said carefully. But right now, we need to focus on getting her well. An OR nurse arrived to take Jessy upstairs. Tyler walked alongside the gurney, holding her hand. I'm going to be right here when you wake up, he promised. And then we're going to figure out what happened and why nobody helped you sooner. Tyler, don't. I'm serious, Jess. This isn't right. You knew something was wrong. You told them something was wrong, and they didn't listen. In the pre-op area, an anesthesiologist explained the procedure while nurses bustled around starting additional IV lines and preparing her arm. Dr. Reeves came in wearing surgical scrubs, her hair tucked under a blue cap. We're going to take good care of you, she said, her hand warm on Jessy's shoulder. When you wake up, the infected tissue will be gone and you'll be on the road to healing. I know it's scary, but you did the right thing coming in tonight. I should have come in sooner, Jessy said. You came when you realized you needed to. That takes courage, especially when people have been dismissing your concerns. Dr. Reeves' eyes were kind above her surgical mask. I see this more often than you'd think. Patients, especially young women, being told they're overreacting to serious symptoms. But you advocated for yourself. That matters. The anesthesiologist placed a mask over Jessy's face. Just breathe normally. Count backwards from 10 for me. 10, 9, 8. Jessy felt Tyler's hand in hers, felt the chemical taste of the gas, felt herself slipping away. Her last conscious thought was relief. Finally, someone was taking her seriously. Finally, someone was going to fix what had been allowed to become so devastatingly wrong. When Jessy woke up in recovery 3 hours later, her arm was wrapped in thick white bandages from wrist to shoulder, and Tyler was sitting in a chair beside her bed, his eyes red-rimmed, but his expression determined. Hey, he said softly. You're okay. Surgery went well. Jessy's mouth was dry, her head foggy. What did they do? Dr. Reeves will explain everything, but she got all the bad tissue out. She said you were really close to needing a much bigger surgery. Another day or two and... He didn't finish the sentence. Dr. Reeves appeared in the recovery bay, pulling off her surgical cap. Miss Morgan, good to see you awake. We removed approximately 30% of the burned area, all the necrotic tissue and the abscess. I had to go deeper than I initially anticipated, which means more extensive grafting later. But we got good margins, and the tissue that's left looks healthy and viable. Thank you, Jessy managed. You'll be in the hospital for at least 3 days on IV antibiotics. We'll change your dressings daily and monitor for any signs of remaining infection. Then we'll talk about the reconstruction plan. Dr. Reeves paused. I want you to know this never should have gotten to this point. Someone should have recognized the severity early and treated it aggressively. What happened to you was a failure of the system. Those words, a failure of the system, echoed in Jessy's foggy mind as she was wheeled to a hospital room. Tyler stayed with her, sleeping in the uncomfortable vinyl chair, and Jessy finally allowed herself to rest, knowing that for the first time in almost 2 weeks, her arm was actually being properly cared for. But Dr. Reeves' words stayed with her. This never should have gotten to this point. And deep in her chest, beneath the relief and the exhaustion and the lingering fear, a small flame of anger began to kindle.
Jessy spent 4 days in the hospital, not 3. On the 3rd day, her temperature spiked to 102.3, and Dr. Reeves ordered another round of cultures and extended her IV antibiotic coverage. The fever broke by morning, but it added another 24 hours to her stay and reinforced just how close she'd come to something catastrophic. Her parents arrived the day after surgery, her mother, Linda, immediately dissolving into tears at Jessy's bedside, while her father, Robert, stood rigid and silent, his hands clenched into fists. They stayed for 2 days, her mother fussing over everything from the hospital food to the angle of Jessy's pillow, her father making pointed comments to every nurse and doctor who entered about how this was allowed to happen. When Jessy was finally discharged, she went home with a suitcase full of medical supplies: antibiotic pills, pain medication, special wound dressings, surgical tape, sterile gloves, saline solution, and a 3-page instruction sheet on wound care. Tyler had taken the week off from his classes to stay with her, setting himself up on her couch with his laptop and textbooks. The reality of her new life hit Jessy the moment she tried to take a shower. She couldn't get the dressing wet. She couldn't lift her arm above her shoulder. She couldn't do it one-handed. Tyler had to help her wrap her arm in plastic and tape, had to stand outside the bathroom door in case she needed help, and the whole experience left Jessy feeling helpless and embarrassed. "I can't do this for months," she said that evening, sitting on the couch while Tyler prepared the supplies for her first at-home dressing change. "You won't have to. You'll get better at managing it," he said, pulling on the sterile gloves. "Ready?" The dressing change was excruciating. Even with pain medication, the exposed tissue was so sensitive that the slightest touch made Jessy gasp. Tyler worked as gently as he could, following Dr. Reeves' instructions precisely. But by the time he finished applying fresh bandages, they were both exhausted and Jessy was crying. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her face with her good hand. "I'm being a baby." "You're not. This is brutal." Tyler cleaned up the medical waste and sat beside her. "Have you thought about what Dr. Reeves said? About how this shouldn't have happened?" Jessy had thought about little else. "What am I supposed to do about it?" "I don't know, but maybe you should talk to a lawyer." The word lawyer felt foreign and frightening. "I'm not trying to sue anyone, Tyler. I just want to heal." "I know, but they messed up, Jess. Multiple people saw you and sent you home when you needed real treatment. You almost lost your arm. Doesn't that make you angry?" It did. The anger had been growing steadily, fed by each painful dressing change, each limitation she discovered, each moment she had to depend on someone else for basic tasks. But the idea of actually doing something about it felt overwhelming. "Let me just get through the next surgery first," she said. Her follow-up appointment with Dr. Reeves was scheduled for 10 days post-op. Tyler drove her to the clinic, a modern building attached to the hospital with floor-to-ceiling windows and abstract art on the walls. The waiting room was filled with other burn patients. She could tell by the bandages, the careful way they held themselves, the haunted look some of them carried. Dr. Reeves examined her arm carefully, probing gently at the edges of the wound. "This is healing beautifully," she said. "The infection is completely resolved. The tissue bed looks healthy and ready for grafting." "When?" asked Jessy. 2 weeks. We want to make sure everything is stable.
I'll be taking skin from your thigh, split thickness grafts, and covering the debrided area. You'll have scarring on both sites, but we'll do everything we can to minimize it. After the examination, Dr. Reeves sat down across from Jessy, her expression shifting from clinical to concerned. I need to talk to you about something. I've been reviewing your records from the urgent care and from Dr. Hendricks. I have significant concerns about the care you received. Jessy's stomach tightened. What kind of concerns? The urgent care physician assistant documented this as a superficial, second-degree burn, but the photographs in the file tell a different story. Even in those initial images, there are indicators of deeper tissue damage that should have warranted immediate specialist referral. And Dr. Hendricks saw you 5 days later when there were obvious signs of necrosis and advancing infection, yet prescribed only oral antibiotics and told you to wait. So they did mess up? In my professional opinion, yes. The standard of care was not met. Dr. Reeves handed Jessy a business card. This is a medical malpractice attorney I've worked with before. Her name is Sandra Mitchell. She specializes in cases involving delayed diagnosis and improper treatment. I think you should talk to her. Jessy stared at the card, her hands trembling slightly. I don't know if I can handle a lawsuit on top of everything else. I understand, but at minimum, there should be documentation of what happened. These kinds of failures need to be addressed, or they'll happen to someone else. Dr. Reeves's voice was gentle but firm. You were badly hurt by negligence, Jessy. You don't have to suffer that in silence. That night, Jessy couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Derek Chen at the urgent care, barely looking at her burn, about Dr. Hendricks dismissing her concerns, telling her to be patient, about the receptionist who wouldn't get her an earlier appointment even when she explained it was getting worse. At 2 a.m, she picked up her phone and emailed Sandra Mitchell's office, briefly explaining what had happened and asking for a consultation. The response came the next morning. Sandra's assistant scheduled a video call for that Friday. Sandra Mitchell appeared on Jessy's laptop screen at exactly 10 a.m., a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and graying blonde hair pulled back in a neat bun. She listened without interrupting as Jessy told the whole story, from the initial burn to the emergency surgery. Do you have all your medical records? Sandra asked when Jessy finished. I can get them. Get everything. Every visit, every prescription, every instruction sheet. I want to see the photographs from the urgent care, the notes from Dr. Hendricks, all of it. Sandra leaned forward. Jessy, I'm going to be direct with you. Based on what you've told me and what Dr. Reeves documented, you have a strong case for medical negligence. Multiple providers failed to meet the standard of care, and you suffered significant harm as a direct result. What would a lawsuit actually involve?
Documentation, expert witnesses, depositions, possibly a trial, though most cases settle. It takes time, usually a year or more. It's not easy, but you wouldn't be alone. I'd handle the legal work, and Dr. Reeves has already indicated she'd be willing to provide expert testimony. The idea of Dr. Reeves testifying, of having someone with authority validate what had happened, made something in Jessy's chest loosen. I need to think about it. Of course, but don't wait too long. There are statutes of limitations. In Texas, you have 2 years from the date of injury for medical malpractice, but the sooner we start building the case, the stronger it will be. After the call ended, Jessy sat staring at her laptop. Tyler emerged from the kitchen with 2 mugs of coffee. What did she say? That I have a case, that it'll take over a year, that I should do it. What do you want to do? Jessy looked down at her bandaged arm, thought about the upcoming surgery, the skin grafts, the months of healing still ahead. She thought about other people going to that urgent care, to Dr. Hendricks, and being dismissed the same way she had been. I want to do it, she said quietly. Not for money. I want them to have to answer for what they did. I want it on record that they were wrong, and I wasn't overreacting. Tyler set down the coffee mugs and pulled his sister into a careful one-armed hug. Then let's do it.
The next day, Jessy signed a retainer agreement with Sandra Mitchell. The day after that, she filed formal requests for all her medical records. And the day after that, she had her second surgery. 6 hours in the OR while Dr. Reeves harvested skin from her thigh and meticulously grafted it over the debrided area of her arm. When Jessy woke up this time, both her arm and her leg were wrapped in bandages, and the pain was somehow worse than before. But Tyler was there again, and so was Maya, who had stopped by after her shift, and her parents called 3 times to check on her. Dr. Reeves came by that evening during her rounds. The grafts took beautifully. "You're doing great." "It doesn't feel great," Jessy admitted. "I know, but you're healing now. Really healing, the way you should have been from the beginning. And I got a call from Sandra Mitchell's office. They're moving forward with your case. Does that cause problems for you, testifying against other doctors?" Dr. Reeves smiled slightly. "I took an oath to do no harm and to uphold standards of care. When those standards aren't met and patients suffer, speaking the truth isn't causing problems, it's doing my job." She squeezed Jessy's shoulder gently. "What happened to you was wrong. I'm going to make sure people know that." Over the next 3 weeks, Jessy healed slowly. The grafts held, the pain gradually decreased. She started physical therapy to regain full range of motion in her arm. She returned to work part-time, explaining to curious colleagues that she'd had a kitchen accident that required surgery. And in the background, quietly but steadily, Sandra Mitchell built her case. Medical records arrived in thick manila envelopes. Expert witnesses were consulted. Timelines were constructed, photographs were analyzed and compared. 2 months after her emergency surgery, Jessy received a letter informing her that Sandra had filed a formal complaint with the Texas Medical Board against both Derek Chen and Dr. Patricia Hendricks, and she'd sent letters of intent to sue to both providers and their insurance companies. "This is where things get real," she told her during their weekly call. "They'll fight back. They'll say you didn't follow instructions, that you delayed seeking care, that your injury was unforeseeable. Are you prepared for that?" Jessy looked at her arm, still scarred, still discolored, the grafted skin never quite matching the surrounding tissue. She thought about the nights she'd spent in pain, being told she was overreacting, about the emergency surgery that should never have been necessary. "I'm prepared," she said. But she had no idea just how hard the fight ahead would actually be.
4 months into the legal process, Jessy received the defendant's response to her lawsuit. Sandra had warned her it would be difficult to read, but nothing prepared her for the actual experience of seeing her trauma dissected, minimized, and reframed as her own fault. The response from Derek Chen's legal team claimed that Jessy had failed to accurately describe the severity of her injury during the initial urgent care visit, that she had neglected proper wound care protocols, and that any subsequent complications were the natural progression of burn injuries and not the result of inadequate treatment. They included a statement from Derek himself describing Jessy as anxious and potentially exaggerating her symptoms for attention. Dr. Hendricks's response was equally brutal. Her attorneys argued that she had appropriately prescribed antibiotics based on the clinical presentation at the time of examination, and that Jessy had failed to follow up as instructed when symptoms worsened. They suggested that Jessy's own delay in seeking emergency care was the primary cause of her need for surgery. Jessy read the documents alone in her apartment on a Thursday evening. By the 3rd page, her hands were shaking so badly she had to set the papers down. By the 5th page, she was crying. By the end, she felt physically sick. She called Sandra immediately. "They're saying I did this to myself. They're calling me a liar." "I know it's painful, Jessy, but this is standard defense strategy. They're trying to shift blame and minimize their liability. We anticipated this. They said I was exaggerating for attention. Derek Chen actually wrote that." Sandra's voice hardened. "And we have medical records that directly contradict that claim. We have Dr. Reeves' surgical notes documenting 3rd-degree burns with necrotic tissue. We have photographs showing obvious signs of serious injury. Their characterization of you doesn't match the objective evidence. But what if the jury believes them? What if people think I'm just some dramatic woman who— Stop. Take a breath. Sandra's tone was firm, but kind. This is exactly what they want. For you to doubt yourself, to feel small, to give up. Don't give them that power. We have the truth on our side, and we have experts who will testify to that truth. After hanging up, Jessy sat in the dark of her living room, staring at her scarred arm. The grafts had healed, but the skin was mottled and discolored, shiny in some places and rough in others. She'd need at least 2 more revision surgeries to improve the appearance, Dr. Reeves had said. Years of scar management, permanent reminders of what had been done to her and what hadn't been done when it mattered most. Tyler came over that weekend and found her in a state he'd never seen before, withdrawn, barely eating, not returning calls from friends or her parents. "Talk to me, Jess," he said, sitting beside her on the couch. She showed him the legal documents. He read them in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. "This is gaslighting. They're literally doing to you in writing what they did to you in person, telling you your reality isn't real. Maybe they're right. Maybe I should have—" "No!" Tyler grabbed her good hand. "You did everything you were supposed to do. You sought medical care immediately. You followed their instructions. You went back when things got worse. They failed you, Jess, not the other way around." But the doubt had taken root. Over the next few weeks, Jessy found herself second-guessing everything. Had she described her symptoms clearly enough at urgent care? Should she have pushed harder with Dr. Hendrix's office? Should she have gone to the ER sooner? Work became increasingly difficult. She'd returned full-time, but her concentration was shot. She missed deadlines on the Thornton project. She snapped at her colleague Marcus over a minor scheduling issue. Rachel found her crying in the bathroom during lunch. "Jessy, what's going on?" Rachel asked gently. "This isn't you." "I'm fine, just stressed." "This is about your burn case, isn't it? Maya told me you were suing the doctors who treated you." Jessy felt a flash of anger. Maya had no right to tell people that. "She's worried about you. We all are. You're not yourself." "Maybe this is who I am now. Maybe I'm just the dramatic woman who overreacts to everything and makes a big deal out of nothing." Rachel's eyes widened. Where is this coming from? From the people who are supposed to be medical professionals telling the court that I'm a liar and an attention seeker. "Jessy, stop. You almost lost your arm. That's not nothing. That's not overreacting." But the words felt hollow. Jessy went home that night and looked up Derek Chen and Dr. Hendrix online. Derek had good reviews on health rating sites. Patients described him as efficient and thorough. Dr. Hendrix had been practicing for over 20 years with no disciplinary actions on record. These were established medical professionals with credentials and reputations. And Jessy was just a 28-year-old project coordinator with a scarred arm and a lawsuit. The depositions were scheduled to begin in June, 5 months after Jessy had filed suit. Sandra prepared her extensively, conducting practice sessions where she fired challenging questions at Jessy, teaching her how to answer clearly and concisely without getting defensive or emotional. "They're going to try to rattle you," Sandra explained during one of their prep sessions. "They'll ask the same questions multiple ways. They'll imply you're lying or misremembering. They'll use your own words against you. Your job is to stay calm, stick to the facts, and don't let them see that they're getting to you." "What if I can't do that? What if I fall apart?" "Then we take a break, you compose yourself, and we continue." "But Jessy, I've been doing this for 23 years. I know you can handle it. You've already survived the hardest part, the actual injury and recovery."
But the night before her deposition, Jessy had a panic attack. She woke up at 3 a.m., unable to breathe, her heart racing, convinced that she was going to fail, that the lawyers would destroy her credibility, that she'd made a horrible mistake pursuing this case. She called Maya, who came over immediately and sat with her until dawn, teaching her breathing exercises and reminding her why she'd started this fight in the first place.
"You're doing this so it doesn't happen to someone else," Maya said. "You're doing this because what they did was wrong and someone needs to say so. You're doing this because you deserve justice." The deposition took place in a conference room at the defendant's attorney's office, a sleek downtown high-rise with marble floors and expensive art. Jessy wore a professional navy dress and kept her scarred arm visible, as Sandra had advised. Derek Chen's attorney was a man named Robert Thornton, mid-50s with silver hair and an expensive suit. He started with basic questions, name, address, occupation, then moved into the night of the injury. "Ms. Morgan, when you arrived at urgent care, did you tell Mr. Chen that you were in severe pain?" "Yes." "Did you use those specific words, severe pain?" "I said it hurt a lot, that the pain was really bad." "But you didn't say severe pain specifically." Sandra interjected. "Objection. Asked and answered." "I'm trying to establish the exact language used," Thornton said smoothly. "I told him it hurt badly," Jessy repeated, feeling her face flush. "I don't remember my exact words, but I made it clear I was in significant pain." "But pain is subjective, isn't it, Miss Morgan? What you consider significant might be different from what a medical professional would consider significant. I had second-degree burns with blisters. It was objectively significant." "Were you trained to assess burn degrees?" "No, but..." "So you were making an assumption about the severity based on your own unprofessional judgment?" Jessy felt her throat tightening. "I was describing what I was experiencing." The questions continued for 3 hours. Thornton dissected every detail of the urgent care visit, looking for any deviation from the instructions she'd been given. "Did you change the dressing at exactly the same time each day?" "Approximately the same time, usually in the morning." "But not exactly." "Sometimes it was 8 a.m., sometimes 9. I had to get to work." "So you prioritized your work schedule over proper medical care?" "No, that's not what I said." "But you just testified that you adjusted the timing of your dressing changes based on your work schedule." Sandra objected again, and Jessy felt herself spiraling. They were twisting everything she said, making her sound negligent and careless when she'd been following the instructions as well as she could while trying to maintain her job and her life. By the time the deposition ended at 5 p.m., Jessy was exhausted and emotionally destroyed. Sandra walked her to her car, where Jessy finally broke down completely. "I can't do this," she sobbed. "I can't go through more days like this. Maybe I should just drop the case." "Jessy, look at me." Sandra's voice was sharp. "This is exactly what they want. They put you through that hell today specifically to break you, to make you give up. If you drop the case now, they win. They get away with hurting you, and they'll hurt someone else. I don't care anymore. I just want it to be over. I understand, but sleep on it. Don't make any decisions tonight. Let's talk Monday." Jessy drove home in a daze. She ignored calls from Tyler and her parents. She sat alone in her apartment as darkness fell, looking at her scarred arm and wondering if pursuing justice was worth reliving her trauma over and over again. The breaking point had arrived, and Jessy had no idea if she had the strength to push through it.
Jessy spent the entire weekend in a fog of doubt and exhaustion. She didn't answer her phone. She barely ate. She sat on her couch replaying a deposition over and over, hearing Robert Thornton's insinuations, feeling the shame of being made to defend her own pain. Sunday afternoon, there was a knock at her door. She ignored it. The knocking continued, followed by Tyler's voice. "Jess, I know you're in there. I'm not leaving until you open the door." Reluctantly, she let him in. He took one look at her. Unwashed hair, same clothes she'd been wearing for 2 days, dark circles under her eyes, and immediately pulled her into a hug. "Sandra called me," he said. "She's worried you're going to drop the case." "I am. Before you do, I need you to read something." Tyler pulled out his phone and handed it to her. On the screen was an email from someone named Jennifer Caldwell with the subject line, "Your lawsuit gave me courage." Jessy read, "Dear Miss Morgan, I heard about your case against Dr. Hendricks through a friend who works at the medical plaza.
I want you to know that you're not alone. 2 years ago, I saw Dr. Hendricks for severe abdominal pain. She told me it was probably just anxiety and stress, that I needed to relax more. She prescribed anti-anxiety medication and sent me home. The pain got worse over 3 weeks, but when I called for a follow-up, I was told to give the medication time to work. I ended up in emergency surgery for a ruptured appendix that had developed into peritonitis. I almost died. The surgeon said if I'd been treated even 2 days earlier, it would have been a routine appendectomy. Instead, I spent a week in the ICU and had complications that required 2 additional surgeries. I never pursued legal action because I thought it was somehow my fault for not being clear enough about how much pain I was in. Reading about your case made me realize that maybe it wasn't my fault. Maybe she has a pattern of dismissing women's symptoms. I know I'm just a stranger, but please don't give up. What you're doing matters. M. Jennifer Caldwell. Jessy read it twice, then looked up at Tyler with tears streaming down her face. How did she find you? I've been posting updates about your case on a local community forum, with your permission from months ago, remember? Just general information, no private details. She reached out through the forum and asked if she could send you a message. There are 3 others too, Jess. 3 other women who saw Hendricks and were dismissed. 3 others? Tyler nodded. Sandra already knows. She's reaching out to them to see if they'll provide statements. Jess, this isn't just about you anymore. This is about a pattern. You might be the one brave enough to finally expose it. Something shifted in Jessy's chest, the weight of responsibility, yes, but also a spark of renewed purpose. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for Jennifer, for those 3 other women, for everyone who'd been told they were overreacting when they were actually in danger. Monday morning, Jessy called Sandra. I'm not dropping the case. She could hear the relief in her voice. I'm glad, because I have news. Dr. Reeves completed her expert report, and it's damning. She doesn't just say the care was inadequate, she systematically breaks down every decision point where proper protocols were ignored. It's the strongest expert testimony I've seen in years. Can I read it? I'm sending it now. Dr. Reeves' report arrived as a PDF in Jessy's email. It was 23 pages of detailed medical analysis, but certain sections jumped out. The photographic evidence from the initial urgent care visit clearly shows deep tissue involvement, inconsistent with superficial second-degree burns. Any competent medical professional examining these images should have recognized indicators of full-thickness injury requiring immediate specialist consultation. The 5-day delay between the urgent care visit and primary care follow-up represents a critical missed opportunity for intervention. By the time Dr. Hendricks examined the patient, there were obvious signs of tissue necrosis that should have prompted immediate emergency referral. Dr. Hendricks' decision to prescribe oral antibiotics and schedule follow-up for 5 days later falls below the acceptable standard of care for a rapidly progressing infection. The appropriate response would have been immediate hospital admission for IV antibiotics and surgical consultation. The patient's repeated attempts to communicate worsening symptoms were documented but systematically dismissed. This pattern of ignoring patient-reported concerns, particularly from a young female patient, reflects a broader issue in medical practice that has been well documented in peer-reviewed literature. Jessy felt validation wash over her like a wave. Dr. Reeves, a respected burn specialist with impeccable credentials, was saying in clear, professional language what Jessy had felt all along. She hadn't been overreacting. She'd been right, and they'd been wrong. That afternoon, Sandra called with more news. The Texas Medical Board completed their investigation. They're issuing a formal reprimand to Dr. Hendricks and requiring her to complete additional continuing education in emergency assessment and patient communication. It's not a suspension, but it's going on her permanent record. What about Derek Chen? The PA? The board determined his supervising physician at the urgent care should have reviewed the case, but they're still investigating. More importantly for our lawsuit, the urgent care clinic's insurance company just reached out. They want to discuss settlement. Jessy's heart jumped. Settlement? Already? Dr. Reeves' report spooked them. They know if this goes to trial, a jury will hear from a prominent surgeon explaining exactly how their PA's negligence endangered your life. They want to make this go away quietly. What about Dr. Hendricks? Is she offering to settle? Not yet. Her insurance company is still in denial mode. But the urgent care settlement would cover your medical expenses and lost wages, plus compensation for pain and suffering. It's not a small amount, Jessy. I don't want them to make it go away quietly, Jessy said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. I want them to admit what they did wrong. Settlement agreements typically include confidentiality clauses. You'd have to agree not to discuss the case publicly. Then I don't want to settle. Not with them and not with Hendricks. I want this to go to trial. I want Dr. Reeves to testify publicly. I want it on record. There was a pause. That's a brave choice, but it means more months of this process. More depositions, more stress. Are you sure? Jessy thought about Jennifer Caldwell, about the 3 other women who'd reached out, about everyone who might still be out there being told they were overreacting to serious symptoms. I'm sure. Over the next few weeks, Jessy felt something she hadn't felt since before the burn. She felt strong. She returned to physical therapy with renewed determination, working to regain full range of motion in her arm. She reconnected with friends she'd been avoiding. She started seeing a therapist who specialized in medical trauma, learning tools to process what she'd been through without letting it consume her.
Maya introduced her to a support group for medical negligence survivors. Jessy went to her first meeting expecting to feel out of place, but instead found a room full of people who understood exactly what she was going through. The gaslighting, the self-doubt, the struggle to trust medical professionals again. A woman named Patricia shared her story of being dismissed through multiple ER visits before finally being diagnosed with a heart condition. A man named David talked about his mother, who died from cancer that had been repeatedly misdiagnosed as stress. Each story was different, but the thread running through all of them was the same: patients knowing something was wrong and being ignored. When it was Jessy's turn to speak, she stood up on shaking legs. My name is Jessy, and I was told I was overreacting to burns that were literally killing the tissue in my arm. She took a breath. But I'm not overreacting to the negligence. I'm not overreacting to the dismissal. I'm not overreacting to any of it. And I'm done apologizing for demanding the care I deserved from the beginning. The room erupted in applause. After the meeting, 3 people came up to her with their own stories of Dr. Hendricks. Sandra had been right. There was a pattern, and Jessy's willingness to fight publicly was bringing it into the light. In August, 7 months after filing the lawsuit, Jessy had her 3rd and final revision surgery on her arm. Dr. Reeves used advanced scar revision techniques, carefully excising the worst of the discolored tissue and rearranging the healthy skin to minimize the visible damage. "This is the best I can do," Dr. Reeves said during the pre-op consultation. "You'll always have scarring, but it'll be significantly less noticeable. More importantly, you'll have full function. I've made peace with the scars. They're proof that I survived." After that surgery, as Jessy recovered once again with Tyler by her side, Sandra called with the news she'd been waiting for. Dr. Hendricks' insurance company wants to settle, and they're willing to do it without a confidentiality agreement. Why would they do that? Because 6 more patients have come forward with similar complaints. The medical board is opening a broader investigation. They know this is going to come out one way or another, and they'd rather control the narrative. They're offering full compensation, a written apology, and an agreement that Dr. Hendricks will undergo peer review of all her cases from the past 5 years. Jessy felt tears prick her eyes. A written apology? They'll admit they were wrong. In writing, legally binding,
admitting that the care you received fell below the standard and caused you unnecessary harm. What about the urgent care? Still refusing to admit fault, but they've increased their settlement offer significantly. With both settlements combined, you'd be looking at enough to cover all your medical expenses, all your lost wages, compensation for your pain and suffering, and funding for ongoing therapy and scar treatment for as long as you need it. Jessy thought about it for a long moment. She'd gotten what she wanted: validation, community, purpose, and finally justice.
1 year after the settlement, Jessy stood in a university lecture hall at the Dell Medical School in Austin, watching Dr. Angela Reeves set up a presentation titled "When Patients Know Best: Learning from Diagnostic Failures." In the front row sat 50 medical students, their laptops open, their faces eager and serious. Jessy had been invited to speak alongside Dr. Reeves as part of a new curriculum on patient communication and diagnostic humility. It was the first time she told her story to an audience of future doctors, and her hands trembled slightly as she waited for her turn. Dr. Reeves began with the medical facts, walking through the case with clinical precision. She showed the photographs from the urgent care visit, images Jessy had seen 100 times, but that still made her stomach clench, and pointed out the visual indicators of deep tissue damage that should have triggered immediate specialist referral. This patient presented with clear warning signs, Dr. Reeves told the students, but 2 separate providers missed them. Why? Was it lack of knowledge, lack of time, or was it something more insidious, the tendency to dismiss concerns from young female patients as anxiety or overreaction? She clicked to the next slide, showing the progression of the untreated burn over 7 days. Several students winced. By the time this patient reached my surgical suite, she was hours away from sepsis. She required emergency debridement of 30% of the burned area. She needed skin grafts, multiple revision surgeries, and months of painful recovery. All of this could have been prevented if someone had listened when she said something was wrong. Dr. Reeves paused, making eye contact with the students. The patient is here today. Her name is Jessy Morgan, and I want you to hear directly from her what it feels like to be on the other side of medical negligence. Jessy stood and walked to the podium on legs that felt unsteady. She'd practiced this speech a dozen times, but facing the actual students, young people who would soon hold other patients' lives in their hands, made it feel newly urgent and important. "I'm not here to make you feel guilty," she began. "I'm here to make you better doctors than the ones who treated me. When I walked into that urgent care on a Tuesday night in March, I trusted that the medical system would take care of me. I did everything I was supposed to do. I sought help immediately. I followed instructions. I spoke up when things got worse, and at every turn I was dismissed." She held up her left arm, the scars clearly visible even after multiple revision surgeries. These scars aren't just from the burn. They're from what happened when people with medical degrees decided their assumptions were more valid than my lived experience of my own body. She walked them through her timeline, but she focused on the emotional reality rather than just the facts. She described the shame of being made to feel dramatic, the fear of being labeled a difficult patient, the way that she'd started to doubt her own perceptions because authority figures kept telling her she was wrong. "There's research on this," she continued. "Women's pain is systematically undertreated and dismissed in medical settings. Women wait longer in emergency rooms, their symptoms are more likely to be attributed to psychological causes, and women of color experience even worse disparities. What happened to me wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of a pattern." A student raised her hand. "What should the doctors have done differently?" "They should have believed me," Jessy said simply. "When I said the pain was severe, they should have believed that I knew what severe meant for my body. When I called saying it was getting worse, they should have seen me that day, not 5 days later. And when Dr. Hendricks saw obvious signs of necrosis, she should have sent me to the emergency room immediately instead of prescribing oral antibiotics and telling me to wait." Another student spoke up. "But how do we balance believing patients with the fact that some people do catastrophize or have health anxiety?" Dr. Reeves stepped in. that's the wrong question. The right question is, what's the harm in taking a patient's concerns seriously? If Jessy had been seen urgently and it turned out to be minor, the worst outcome is an unnecessary visit. But by dismissing her concerns, the actual outcome was permanent scarring and potential death. The risk-benefit analysis should always err on the side of caution. After the presentation, several students approached Jessy. A young woman with kind eyes introduced herself as Maria. "Thank you for sharing your story. My mother had something similar happen. She kept telling doctors her chest pain was serious, but they said it was just stress. She had a heart attack 2 weeks later. She survived, but barely. I'm sorry that happened to her," Jessy said. "She's why I'm going into medicine. I want to be the kind of doctor who listens." Maria hesitated. "Can I ask, do you still trust doctors after everything?" Jessy considered the question carefully. "I trust Dr. Reeves completely. I trust my therapist. I trust Maya, who's a nurse. I've learned that there are medical professionals who genuinely care about getting it right. But I also learned that I can't outsource my health to anyone else. I have to be my own advocate, and I can't be afraid to push back when something doesn't feel right." Over the following months, Jessy received invitations to speak at 2 other medical schools and at a patient safety conference in Houston. Each time she told her story with a little more confidence, a little less pain. She was transforming her trauma into something useful, something that might prevent others from suffering the same way. Her regular life had found a new rhythm too. She'd been promoted at work to senior project coordinator, leading the firm's largest sustainable development project, a mixed-use building in downtown Austin that would be entirely carbon neutral. Marcus had specifically cited her resilience and problem-solving skills in the promotion letter, though Jessy suspected he also felt guilty for not recognizing how much she'd been struggling during the lawsuit.
She'd started dating someone, a software developer named Chris, whom she'd met through Rachel. He knew about her scars, had heard the whole story, and never once made her feel like damaged goods. Their third date had been to a cooking class, and when Jessy hesitated near the stove, he'd gently taken her hand and said, "We'll be careful, but we're not letting fear steal things you love." Tyler graduated from UT and got accepted to graduate school in environmental science. At his graduation dinner, he raised a glass to Jessy. "To my sister, who taught me that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. You're the strongest person I know." Her parents had struggled more with the aftermath. Linda had become almost obsessively worried about Jessy's health, calling multiple times a week to check on her. Robert had channeled his anger into activism, joining a patient advocacy group and lobbying for stronger medical oversight in Texas. They were processing their helplessness in their own ways, and Jessy tried to be patient with them. The settlement money had provided security Jessy had never experienced before. She paid off her student loans, put a down payment on a small house with a larger kitchen, one she'd carefully designed with safety in mind, and set aside funds for future scar treatments. But more importantly, she donated a significant portion to medical advocacy organizations and to a scholarship fund for nursing students from underrepresented communities. The support group she joined had become a central part of her life. She'd taken over as co-facilitator, helping new members navigate the complex feelings that came with medical trauma. She'd watched people arrive broken and angry, and gradually find their way to something like peace, not forgetting, never forgetting, but learning to carry what happened without being crushed by it. Jennifer Caldwell had become a friend. They met for coffee once a month, trading stories about their ongoing journeys. Jennifer had eventually filed her own complaint against Dr. Hendricks, adding to the growing documentation of problematic patterns. The medical board's expanded investigation had led to mandatory remedial training and ongoing supervision for Dr. Hendricks. Not enough, perhaps, but more than nothing. On the 1-year anniversary of her final surgery, Jessy threw a party she called the Survival Celebration. She invited everyone who'd supported her through the nightmare: Tyler, her parents, Maya, Rachel, Sandra, Chris, her support group members, and Dr. Reeves. Dr. Reeves arrived with a gift,
a framed copy of a medical journal article she'd published titled Patient Advocacy in Burn Treatment: Lessons from a Case of Delayed Diagnosis. Jessy's case was featured prominently, though her name had been changed to protect her privacy per the settlement terms. This is being used in medical schools across the country now, Dr. Reeves said. Your story is teaching the next generation of doctors to do better. Jessy felt tears sting her eyes as she read the abstract. Her pain, her fight, her refusal to be silenced. It was all being transformed into education, into prevention, into change. Later that evening, as guests mingled in her backyard, Chris found her standing alone for a moment, looking at the scars on her arm in the fading sunlight. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," Jessy said, and realized she meant it. "I was just thinking about how different my life is from a year ago. How different I am." "Different how?" "Stronger, clearer, less willing to make myself small to make other people comfortable." She smiled. "The scars are ugly, but sometimes I think I needed them. Not the physical ones, nobody needs those, but the experience, the fight, the proof that I can survive hard things. You're remarkable, you know that." Jessy shook her head. "I'm just someone who refused to be told I was overreacting when I knew I wasn't. That shouldn't be remarkable. That should be normal. But it's not normal yet, so until it is, people like you have to keep speaking up, keep fighting, keep making noise." As the party continued around her, Jessy looked at the community she'd built. People who believed her, supported her, and stood with her. She thought about the students she'd spoken to, the patients who'd reached out, the small but meaningful changes her case had sparked in medical protocols and training. She'd never wanted to be a victim or a survivor or an advocate. She just wanted to be Jessy, living her quiet life in Austin, working on sustainable buildings and having brunch with her brother. But life had given her a different path, and she'd walked it with a courage she didn't know she possessed. She'd turned her trauma into testimony, her pain into purpose, her silence into a voice that refused to be dismissed. The burns had healed. The scars remained. But Jessy Morgan was no longer the woman who apologized for taking up space, who minimized her own suffering, who trusted authority more than her own instincts. She was someone who knew her worth, someone who demanded better, someone who looked at an unjust system and said, "No, this ends with me." And in the end, that was the greatest triumph of all, not just surviving, but transforming, not just healing, but helping others heal. Not just speaking her truth, but creating a world where fewer people would need to fight the same battle. The plastic surgeon had testified, the courts had listened, justice had been served. But more than that, change had begun. And Jessy Morgan, who was once told she was overreacting, had been the catalyst for it all.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.